When writing a memoir, you have exactly two choices when it comes to dealing with what perspective you're going to be writing from. The first and most common is to write as yourself as you are now, looking back with all of the wisdom you've acquired since that time. The second and far less common is to actually write as you were in that moment. You're writing about yourself as a child. You are talking about yourself as if you were still that child. You don't know anything that you know now. Yet somehow you're still required to hint to the reader what's to come. Now, obviously, the first option is more common because it is easier. It is much easier to write as the person that you are now and just reflect back onto the silly or idealistic or outright naive person you were back then. It's much harder to remember who you were to the point that you write as if you were still them. In her new memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, former child actor Jennette McCurdy performs a masterclass on how to do the second option to the point where, I'll be honest, it took me a while to realize that she was in fact writing this book herself. I thought perhaps that, like many celebrities, she had used a ghostwriter, and it took me well into half the book to realize that no, this girl wrote this herself. There can be no other option. So not only did this former actor, who doesn't appear to have any formal education in writing, write an absolutely outstanding memoir, she did it in the most difficult way. And boy, did she smash it out of the park. Why is this memoir such a masterclass? We're going to talk about that today. Hello, shameless writers. I'm Kristen McTiernan, the nonsense-free editor, here for your regular dose of writing wisdom. We are back on the topic of memoirs this week, and boy, do I have a good one for you. To start with, let me start off with the obvious. As I mentioned in the introduction, Jennette actually did write this book. I will not be convinced otherwise. This is her baby, her writing, and then she probably worked with a talented editor with her publisher who really made her writing shine. For a memoir, this is long, and that's very common when we're talking about celebrity memoirs. They want to stuff those things as full as humanly possible. See Katie Couric's beautifully written, yet also strangely odious memoir. I read that whole damn thing and I can't remember a single bit of it, except that the prose was beautiful. Why? Because there were a lot of scenes in there that made no sense, that were pure filler, and it was just an exercise in ego stroking. Exhausting. Not so with this book. Jennette McCurdy, in addition to being horribly mistreated as a child actor, is also the child of a horrible, odious, abusive mother who just hits all the beats that hit me right in the fields. One, she's a hoarder. Do not like hoarders. Two, she was definitely a narcissist, as so many abusers are. And three, she successfully manipulated and controlled all of her children well into adulthood until her absolutely joyful death. Yes, I am also glad that this woman is dead. And the reason that I was able to so blissfully rejoice in a stranger's death is because the strength of Jennette McCurdy's writing. We can get a good idea of exactly where the strength of her writing comes from just by looking at the prologue. It's very tempting for a lot of memoirists, particularly if they're not experienced writers, to start off their book with a great deal of narrative dumping. For instance, for a story like Jennette McCurdy's, some less talented writer might have been tempted to start it off with something like this. I sat in the hospital watching my mother die. It was difficult for me and I felt conflicted. She'd been so terribly abusive to me throughout my entire life. So abusive, in fact, that all I could think to do was whisper in her ear, "Mommy, I'm at my goal weight of 89 pounds," in the desperate hope that it would wake her up. But it didn't, and so I was left with my conflicted emotions until inevitably she died. There's nothing wrong with any of that. It's just that it's not really engaging, it doesn't set the scene, and it doesn't make you want to read more. But here's how Jennette McCurdy actually set up her prologue. It's strange how we always give big news to loved ones in a coma, as if a coma is just a thing that happens from a lack of something to be excited about in your life. Mom is in the ICU at the hospital. The doctor told us she has 48 hours to live. Grandma, Grandpa, and Dad are out in the waiting room, calling relatives and eating vending machine snacks. Grandma says Nutter Butters soothe her anxiety. I wait until everyone else goes down to grab some food so I can be alone with her. I pull the squeaky chair close to her bed and sit down. I smile. I'm about to bring the big guns. Forget weddings, forget moving home. I've got something more important to offer. Something I'm sure Mom cares about more than anything. Mommy, I am so skinny right now. I'm finally down to 89 pounds. I'm so sure this fact will work that I lean all the way back in my chair and pompously cross my legs. I wait for her to come to, and wait and wait. But she never does. She never does come to. I can't make sense of it. If my weight isn't enough to get Mom to wake up, then nothing will be. And if nothing can wake her up, then that means she's really going to die. And if she's really going to die, what am I supposed to do with myself? My life purpose has always been to make Mom happy, to be who she wants me to be. So without Mom, who am I supposed to be now? Let's pretend Jennette McCurdy or her publisher didn't choose that slam bang of a title, which is great, by the way. I am here for it. Let's pretend she had chosen something more generic, My Terrible Life at Nickelodeon or My Life as a Child Star. Even if she hadn't chosen such a good title for her book, with that prologue, we still would have known exactly what this book was going to be about. When we turned the page and got to section 1, which is titled Before, and then section 2, many, many, many pages later, which is titled After, we would know based on that prologue that this is not before her acting career and after her acting career. No, no. This is before Mom died and after Mom died. That is the bifurcation of her life. We know that from the prologue. We know what this theme is going to be. That's what good writing looks like. It sets up exactly what's going on. And by the way, for all of you fiction editors who are like, oh, prologues are so terrible, pay attention to this and tell me again that they're terrible. Yeah, chew on that. In addition to the writing, Jennette McCurdy also crosses into greatness because, and this is something else that I've told you to do, she tells the truth. With cases like this, when we're talking about addiction, when we're talking about mental illness, well, I don't know. Is OCD a mental illness or is it neurodivergency? I'm actually not sure. Please don't get mad at me. When we're dealing with eating disorders, especially when we're dealing with abuse coming from multiple angles. In this instance, she had an abusive home, and then she also was profoundly abused in her acting career. It's very easy to slip into that cool, comfortable bath of being a victim who's always the good guy, who's always kind, and everybody else is just so awful. Jennette McCurdy does not do that. She tells the truth, and she shows us what happens when you are the victim of abuse. You're not always going to be a nice person who sees the best in others and acts exactly the way we all kind of hope we would act. No, she comes right out and says it. Hell yes, I was jealous of Ariana Grande, and I'm not sorry. Well, maybe she's sorry now. But as she was writing as herself in her early 20s, she wasn't sorry then. And, I get it. And that's the thing about telling the truth. You show us the bad things that happened to you, and then you also show that the bad things that you thought, said, and did as a result, because you've set up what's happened to you, we get it. And even though, unpleasant behavior, definitely, and maybe we don't approve, but we understand. And that's the power of the memoir because it really helps engage other people's empathy. Like I said, I didn't watch iCarly or whatever that show is, Sam and Cat that she did with Ariana Grande. It would have been creepy if I did. I'm in my 40s and I don't have children. So that would have been weird. Also, side note, Jennette McCurdy still looks like she's about 15. She is 30. So she's not like way younger than me, but she played younger than she was. So just so if you're also unfamiliar with her. She told us the truth about her eating disorder. She told us the truth about her abuse and all of the ways that kind of messed her up in the relationships that she chose subsequently. And even despite all of her bad choices, and we can see it coming as she chooses men, where she is repeating the dynamic that she had with her mother, where she's constantly trying to fix someone who's broken, we're still with her the whole way. Finally, the major strength of her book is actually the structure. I've mentioned in several of my other videos that, you don't have to have some major event in your life. Now, this girl does. She has many major events in her life. And honestly, I wouldn't even have been mad at her if she decided to cash in and do two separate memoirs, like one about her crazy mom and her home life and her recovery, and then one entirely separate one about Nickelodeon. I would have forgiven her for that because she packs a lot into this book. But even though it's long and even though there's a lot in there, the way that she structures it is eminently satisfying. For one, she does write her scenes as if this were a fictional novel. It's not so much exposition all the time. She always, always, always includes dialogue from both parties or more if there's more people in the room at the time. You feel like you're reading a novel. Each scene is constructed and picked meticulously and put in chronological order in this instance, for the most part. Every now and again, she does kind of a flashback, but it's only like a flashback by a few weeks. I mentioned before that she separated her book into parts 1 and 2, part 1 before, part 2 after. The after part is much shorter, but it's so satisfying. The ending in this book is so satisfying, almost as if it were a novel, almost as if she were an author who was able to pick her ending. Now, I wanted to point this out because not everybody's story is going to wrap up this neatly. Not everybody is going to have that closure for their memoir. But in this case, she did. And she did it beautifully. Now, the theme in this book is about her mother, how her mother's abuse, how her mother's control over her life made her into who she is in a way, or really made her who she was. In all sincerity, I believe that who she is now, she would have become that anyway. I don't really subscribe to the idea of, well, thank God you did all that suffering because you wouldn't be the great person you are now. I don't subscribe to that. I think that she became who she is now in spite of her mother, not because of her mother. And the theme of this book is us watching her become herself in spite of her mother. And even though it doesn't come at the end, it's not exactly the climax of the story. But really, the culmination of her becoming herself is when she's sitting in a room. Nickelodeon offers her $300,000 to keep her mouth shut about everything that she saw, the abuse that she suffered, and the abuse that the creator, whose name apparently I shouldn't say for algorithm purposes, did to other people as well. Now, her acting career is coming to an end. She knows that it is, and she doesn't have anything else lined up. That money sure could have come in handy. But here's how she handled it. This is what everything has been building up to. Everything that she went through with her mother and the passivity that it engendered, and how she just went along to go along and never had a voice for herself and was pushed into a dream she didn't even want. But it all led up to this. Books are judged, perhaps unfairly, by their first pages and their last pages. Even though it's reasonable, because the first pages are the ones that get you interested into it. Particularly now in this age of ebooks, it's very important that the first page snag you. We've already gone over that. They definitely do. But the last pages are what you leave the reader with. There's not going to be a sequel to this. This isn't some, series fantasy book. But this is what she leaves us with. Sometimes I miss her. And I start to fantasize about what life would have been like if she were still alive. And I imagine that maybe she'd have apologized and we'd have wept in each other's arms and promised each other that we'd start fresh. Maybe she'd support me having my own identity, my own hopes and dreams and pursuits. But then I realize I'm just romanticizing the dead in the same way I wish everyone else wouldn't. Mom made it very clear she had no interest in changing. If she were still alive, she'd still be trying her best to manipulate me into being who she wanted me to be. I'd still be purging or restricting or binging or some combination of the three, and she'd still be endorsing it. I'd still be forcing myself to act, miserably going through the motions of performing on shiny sitcoms. How many times can you pratfall over a carpet or sell a line you don't believe in before your soul dies? There's a good chance I would have had a complete and public mental breakdown by this point. I'd still be deeply unhappy and severely mentally unhealthy. I look at the words again. Brave, kind, loyal, sweet, loving, graceful. I shake my head. I don't cry. The Doobie Brothers' What a Fool Believes starts playing from the sad man's radio. I stand up, wipe the dirt off my jeans, and walk away. I know I'm not coming back. That's the last line, and it is masterful. We know everything that this girl went through. because she did not hold back. I'll be honest. If I ever wrote a memoir, which I won't because I'm a coward, I would not include all the stuff that she put in there. But she trusted us. She trusted her readers. And she also trusted herself, understanding that this is part of her catharsis. And everything that she put in that book is the reason why she is who she is now. And that's what she left us with. And we believe her. As a final note, I do want to mention that Jennette McCurdy refers to the person in her book as the creator based on legal advice. I have a whole video talking about how not to get sued when you write a memoir, and it is very clear that Jennette McCurdy took it very seriously. She did not want to get sued for this book, and she did a great job being honest, but while also protecting herself. And I hope that you, particularly if you're writing about abuse and things that happen to you, will also take care of yourself. Because sometimes you need to change the names, sometimes you need to change places, sometimes you just need to twist a few details so that you can tell the truth about what happened to you and how those experiences shaped you as a person. You deserve to tell your story as it happened to you. Changing the names and maybe the locations and maybe some people's race or gender doesn't change the fact that you're telling your truth. So don't let that scare you off. Talk to a lawyer if you need to, but tell your story regardless. And that's all I have for this week. I would love to hear it. If you've read Jennette McCurdy's book, please comment below and tell me what you thought and what you found most insightful about the book. Or if you haven't and you read somebody else's book and you found it very interesting as well, I would love to hear about that. I loved this so much, I kind of want to read more that might be similar to it. And of course, I don't know any child actors or anyone under the age of 40, it seems like. So if there are any more similar books out there, please let me know below. I'd love to hear about it. So until next time, take care and write well.